do this in person, it really would have been terrific. But we'll do the best we can with Zoom, and I think we'll do okay. So I've taught how to open a story before, and whenever I do, I always use Ken Follett's The Key to Rebecca, because I've never seen the craft of opening a story done better than in this one.
Into that one.
Sorry? Oh, okay. Anyway, and so just as a little bit of background, general principles for how to accomplish the necessary task of seducing a reader into a story, because we're all tied up in our daily lives with our daily concerns and worries and whatever it is we're focused on. And to get someone to forget about all that and to enter this fake world, this artificial world, this made up world of a story is not an easy thing to do. There are 3 elements of doing it, no particular order of importance. And when I say them, they'll seem obvious, but they're the 3 elements of every story, which are who, what, and where. That's really it. The who are the characters, the what is the plot, and the where is the setting. And to draw someone into a story, you need to start spooling out some combination of those 3 elements. Again, there's no order of importance. I've seen it done in countless ways. You can emphasize one more than the others. You can start with one and hold back on the others. It doesn't matter. But one way or another, there is no way to tell a story, to introduce a story, without beginning to spool out some information to ground the reader in the who, the what, and the where of your story. But that's the easy part. The hard part, the art of it, is in this. Every piece of information you dole out to the reader to nourish the reader with regard to your new who and what and where, which you're trying to bring the reader into, every piece of information has to accomplish the insidious opposite task of making the reader hungry for more information, which is to say, every question you answer should provoke in the reader's mind another question. So as the reader's getting drawn into the story and becoming grounded in the story, the reader's simultaneously wanting to know more about the story. And that's what keeps the reader reading. Now that's the theory of it, as I see it. That's the theory of how to hook a reader at the beginning of the story. Now let's look at the practice. And I think you'll see Follett doing just what I'm talking about and doing it in an absolutely superb way. By the way, I should just quickly say, no book is for everyone. And you might think, you know, the Key to Rebecca doesn't sound like my kind of book. It's a political thriller. I'm not really into that. And that's completely fine. But try to set aside your personal taste, really, whether you like it or don't like it. Try to set that aside and just appreciate the craft that we're talking about and how Follett is accomplishing his objective of drawing his readers into the story. Okay. I'd love to try to make this interactive. I'm not the most Zoom experienced person in the world, but let's give it a try. And if it doesn't work, we'll back up and I'll talk more. But even if we have to do that, let's pause and consider when I ask a question about what Follett's doing, because I think that's the best way to really appreciate it. Okay. The first sentence, first paragraph, is just 6 words, 6 amazing words, I think. The last camel collapsed at noon. That's it. So Follett doesn't say anything yet about who, and he gives you a little bit about where, but only indirectly. But the what is what he's emphasizing here. So nothing about who, unless the book is about a camel that just collapsed, which seems unlikely. Nothing about who, a little bit about where, but Follett's great about this. Where do you think this story is set, given that a camel just collapsed?
The desert.
Yeah, probably starting to visualize a desert. Be unusual. I mean, it's not impossible. A camel could collapse in the snow, I guess, or in a swimming pool or something like that, a living room. It's not impossible. But Follett's really good about this. He doesn't open by giving you the full data dump. He gives you something that engages your mind and makes you want to know more. to at least confirm your suspicion. He doesn't say, "Hi, we're in a desert." He just says the last camel collapsed at noon. And you immediately start thinking, desert? Thinking desert, maybe imagining desert, but you're not sure. And so the human mind, you want to confirm your suspicion. So we think we're getting a feeling for where, but the what is everything in this sentence. And he chooses his words so beautifully. So what just happened? Well, the last camel collapsed at noon. By the way, the noon is a little bit about where, because is it typically hotter during the day? Is it light during the day? Yeah, you get the idea. So he's giving you little, very specific things that start to conjure images in your mind. But let me ask you this regarding the what. The last camel collapsed at noon. Does it sound like that's a good thing or a bad thing?
A bad thing.
Yeah, it's a bad thing. It sounds bad. And again, the economy with which he chooses words to accomplish a lot really impresses me. He doesn't say the second, the third, the sixth camel. It's the last camel. He's doing a lot of work with that one word. We don't know. Was there one before it? Were there 10 before it? But immediately what he tells you is a whole bunch of camels have already collapsed. And now the last one just collapsed. And we don't know any more than what we're trying to blow out this first paragraph. We don't know any more than what I just said. But it sounds really bad, doesn't it? I mean, I'm thinking somebody's probably in the desert with a bunch of camels. I don't know how many. And one by one, they've collapsed. And now the last one just collapsed. That cannot possibly be good. It's bad. It's a complication. It's an obstacle. Something bad is going on. And just like we tend to slow down for car accidents, something bad is going down. It engages our curiosity. And so we want to read more. And again, no book is for everyone, no opening is for everyone. But I think if you tend to like thrillers, then that is about the best 6-word opening I've ever come across. He does so much there that makes you want to go on to the next paragraph. And the goal of every sentence, I've heard, and I like this saying, goal of every sentence is to get you to want to read the next sentence. Every paragraph is to get you to read every paragraph, every chapter, etc. So all he has to do with this first sentence, his goal is to make you go on to the next sentence. And I would say, cool, mission accomplished. Okay, that's the first sentence. Now we'll go on to the second one. Do you all have it in front of you? Is it helpful if I read it first? I don't know. You can see it right in front of you. Okay, cool. So let's look at that second sentence. Again, in terms of who, what, and where, what are we getting here? To me, it's more about the who. Sounds like this guy knows camels. He's experienced with camels. Like I personally don't have much of an opinion about camels. I've seen a couple in my life, but I don't know enough to say that I hate camels only a little, and that constitutes liking a camel as much as a person can like a camel. I don't know nearly enough about camels to get into that level of detail, but this guy does. So, and also the fact that it was the youngest and strongest of 3. Now we know there were 3, and the first 2 are collapsed, maybe dead. We don't know if they're dead. They collapsed. So that's more curiosity, more making us want to know more. But we know it was the youngest and strongest, and he liked it. And now it's collapsed too. So we're getting curious about this guy because I'm starting to pick up on this. I think we're in a desert, but I'm not sure. What do we know about this guy so far? And Follett has absolutely not given us a resume, which is something that people sometimes do. I know I used to do it when I was starting out. It's the data dump. I want you to know everything you need to know about this character. And the information might be necessary, but it's always dull when it's presented as just a data dump. Follett's not doing that. He's giving you an impression and engaging your curiosity. Would you say that this is someone who seems like he might be experienced in the desert? Yeah, I think so, but we're not sure. And that makes us want to know more. But I'm getting that feeling. He certainly seems to know a bit about camels. Okay, that's the second paragraph. Now let's go on to the third. I love this one. They climbed the leeward side of a small hill, man and camel planting big, clumsy feet in the inconstant sand. See how he's going a little further. He hasn't said the word desert yet, but he's starting to give you more. And you're starting to feel like, I was thinking it was a desert. This isn't conscious. It shouldn't be conscious. I mean, once you've read it as many times as I have, and we'll talk about that too, the value of reading like a writer. But once you've read it again and again, you can start to see the craft, and you can see what the author is doing. But when you first read this, none of this is conscious. You were maybe in the first paragraph getting a picture of a desert, and now he talks about a small hill. And the camel and the man are planting their clumsy feet in the inconstant sand. And I love that too. Okay, sand. I'm like, yeah, I was thinking desert. I'm starting to think, yeah, I was probably right about desert. Okay. And then I love the rest of this. Another hillock to climb, and after that, 1,000 more. So now you're really starting to get the picture. He still hasn't said desert, but but it's so much better. Why say desert when you can say this? My God, can you imagine? It sounds bad. All the other camels have collapsed. It's noon, probably, and it's hot in the desert. They get to the top of this hill, and all they see is 1,000 more exactly like it. As if the camel despaired at the thought. You get the rest. Staring across the empty desert with the indifference of the dying. I'm like, oh my God. So it's really bad. They're in the desert, and it's like an empty desert. It's not one of those deserts with a lot of cacti and maybe there's a road cutting through it. All it is 1,000 identical hillocks, and they can go up and down forever, but not forever because it's very hot and there's nothing but sand and hillocks. So I'm like, okay, now I got more about the where there, and it sounds pretty. And as far as the what goes, Follett's still telling us not good. It's bad. It's extremely hot. There's nothing but hillocks around. And actually, maybe he hasn't said hot. Doesn't matter. I'm feeling the heat. And the last camel just collapsed the third. Okay. Now it's about to get worse. What the man does, hauls on the nose rope, fourth paragraph, thing won't even move. And then he stabs it in the butt. Blood flowed from the wound, but the camel did not even look around. So I love this too, because what do you pick up about this guy now? That to try to get a camel to move without hesitation, he pulled out a razor sharp curved Bedouin knife. Bedouins, again, thinking desert here, and stabbed it in the butt. Is he what type of person? A gentle person, a humanitarian person, or a ruthless person?
He's not.
Please, I'm sorry. Oh, I couldn't hear you, Tom. I don't know. I think you might be muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I thought I had pressed. Oh, yeah. Well, he's just not a nice guy.
Yeah, probably not a nice guy. But again, what's so beautiful is these are impressions we're picking up from his behavior. Follett never just tells you he was a nice man. He was a cruel man. He doesn't solve the problem for you. He gives you hints.
Also, it sounds like he's in a desperate situation. I mean, somebody who has 3 camels and
right.
driven them to collapse. I mean, even from paragraph 2, we know something really urgent or desperate.
Exactly.
Maybe he's just pragmatic.
Yeah,
could just be pragmatic, but still pragmatic, maybe tough-minded, but kind of a man of action, I would say. I mean, I'll admit it. If I saw a camel sit down and I didn't know how to get it to move, and someone said, "Oh, Barry, just stab it in the ass," I'd be like, really? You know, it would take a lot to get me to do that. But this guy did it like that.
How about a little desperate?
Sounds desperate too. I agree. I mean, it's definitely not the kind of thing you would do if you need to go a long distance with this camel. I mean, you're wounding it. Probably not a good thing to do unless, I missed you said that, but unless, as you say, you're desperate. So, okay, we're getting more of an impression about this guy, and it's all congruent so far. I don't know that that's necessary. You might want to give conflicting impressions. I can see where that's a possibility in some stories, but here, Follett gives you hints, and then he keeps spooling out more information that, at least for me, tends to confirm my suspicions while it's satisfying me with more information, always making me hungry for more information. Okay, so this paragraph I love. The man understood what was happening. Right there tells you, even without more, like, okay, all right, this guy, is he experienced in the desert or not? But Follett doesn't stop with the general point. He says, what is happening? The very tissues of the animal's body starved of nourishment. It simply stopped working. And the man had seen camels collapse like this one on the outskirts of an oasis. Okay, so a little bit more. Yeah, I thought this guy was experienced with camels, and I was right, because he knows exactly what's happening. Its tissues are starved of nourishment. Plus, he's seen this kind of thing before. I was right. Got that feeling of satisfaction, like I'm solving the puzzle, and that engages me. Even though what's going on? It sounds very bad. Then we go to the next paragraph. There were 2 more tricks the man might have tried. And it's like all the things we're talking about, the desperate circumstances, the character of the man, it's all being reinforced in this paragraph here. 2 more tricks: pour waters in the nostrils or light a fire under it. I mean, wow, that's serious. He cannot spare the water for one nor the firewood for the other. Sounds desperate. Doesn't even have a little bit of firewood. And besides, neither method had a great chance of success. Wow. This guy, I mean, let's unpack that because there's so much going on. He knows what's happening. Sorry, the 2 more tricks he might have tried. Both pretty ruthless things to do. Make the camel feel like it's drowning on the one hand, or you can light a fire under it on the other. So probably a ruthless guy, but he can't spare the water or the firewood. Right. We were right about thinking it's a desperate situation. Definitely is. He's got very little material with him. And here's the other thing. Besides, neither method had a great chance of success. Right. This guy has so much experience with camels that he knows what's happening when they lie down and stop moving. He knows how he might be able to jumpstart one. He knows it probably won't work because he's seen it done so many times, with success or failure. And besides which, he doesn't even below firewood. So wow, things are looking bad for this guy. Okay. And finally, he really grounds you with something specific, only after he's warmed you up, or something definitive, only after he's warmed you up with all the micro clues. It's time to stop anyway. The sun was high and fierce, had a feeling, but he never spelled it out. He just started with noon. Sun was high and fierce. The long Saharan summer was beginning. Oh, we're in the Sahara. Okay. The midday temperature would reach 110 degrees in the shade. Sounds pretty bad.
So I have a question, if you don't mind.
Please. Not at all.
Word number 19 in the story says giallo.
I'm sorry?
Giallo.
Yeah. Yes.
That's in Libya. So if you look that up, you kind of know a lot about where it is very early.
You know, that's funny. I've never looked it up. I always just assumed it was a city somewhere in the Arab world where the story's set. But you're right. If you're, it's funny. When I first read this book, there were no digital books or anything like that. I just read it as a paperback. So it would have been, unless I was sitting right next to an encyclopedia or something like that, there wouldn't really have been the opportunity. But you're right. These days, people read on devices. You've almost always got something close at hand. If you're really curious, you could just check it out. And that's one more clue that he's giving about where we are. If you know the city or you want to bother to look it up. Yeah, it's all in there. So we could go on, but if you read those, the 2 paragraphs we didn't get to, it's going to be more of the same. It's bad. There's no shade, no shelter. It looks like some of this got the formatting got goofy. I don't know if yours is, but it's still readable. One place was as bad as the other. And he pitched his tent beside the dying camel there on top of the hillock, which to me is a great image. So let's talk about a few principles that I think are being nicely illustrated and executed on. One of them is I just said I love that image, and again, whether you love it or I love it isn't really the point, but you want to create powerful imagery in a story, and for me, that image of the man and the camel at the top of a hillock under the sweltering Saharan sun with nothing around, no shelter, no shade, nothing but 1,000 identical hillocks. The camel's dying and doesn't even care anymore. And this man is who? I don't know, but he's interesting. I think that's a great image. So keep in mind the power of imagery in your stories, but don't get too hung up on visual imagery, because the point of a story isn't to just make people see things. It's to make readers feel like they're there, to make them feel they're with the characters or they are the characters. And the visual cues are only one way of accomplishing that, a powerful way, but not the only way. And I think it's a very good habit. We're primarily visual creatures, so we can over rely on the visual presentation of the places we're depicting in our stories. Don't stop there. Keep in mind that what you can hear in a place, what you feel in terms of the temperature, the humidity, these are also really important things. And a kind of fourth dimension too, which is, and smell is important, taste doesn't come into the equation as often, but it can. But then there's another dimension, which is how a place can make a character feel based on the character's history with that place, or relationship to that place. Those are all things that can make readers feel like they're there. And if the reader doesn't feel like she's there, then your book isn't working, I think. So visual is important, but don't forget the other senses. And I can tell you that almost always when I'm writing a scene, without meaning to, I start with visual because it's just important to us. Like, what does it look like? And that's what I present first. And then inevitably, sometimes I remember to do other things, but not as much as I ought to. And when I go back, I remember, hey, Barry, what does a place sound like? It's easier when you can go there for the on-site research, which is another reason I really like doing the on-site research, because I'm lazy and I don't have to make these things up. But ask yourself, how does it sound? What are the sounds you can hear? How does it smell, etc.? Those are also really important things. And there's another thing that's super important here, and we're doing a kind of fractal or a microcosm of it right now. I want to say this now because if I forget, I'll kick myself. The most important thing that any writer can do besides writing, besides reading, is to read like a writer. And let me tell you what I mean by that, because really, if you take nothing else out of this conversation today, please take away this. When I say read like a writer, this is what I mean. Behind all art is craft. And a lot of people who haven't really thought about this as much as they should will sometimes say glib things like, oh, Barry, but you can't teach art. Everybody knows you can't teach art. And that's true, but it's really missing the point. Art can't be taught. Nobody should be trying to teach art. But you can't do art unless you have mastered craft. And craft can be taught, and craft can be learned. Craft is what we should be trying to teach. Only when you have mastered the rules of craft, or I don't know, mastery is a strong word, but whatever. Only when you become adept with the rules of craft and learned how to use them and how to bend them, only then can you really start to express yourself in whatever unique way you might consider to be an expression of yourself as an artist. So anytime someone says to you, oh, but you can't teach art, I don't know. I don't really like to roll my eyes. I think it's rude, but you could roll your eyes inwardly because they're saying something that's true, but is just not the point. So we're talking about craft. And how do you learn craft? By reading like a writer. Okay, I don't know. We have, unfortunately, it's Zoom and everything. We haven't really had a chance to just get to know each other like you do at a regular conference. And I'm sorry for that. If we had, then I'd have a better idea about what sorts of work you're all writing and interested in writing. But it doesn't matter if I know the answer. What really matters is that you do. So you know what kind of writing interests you, and that's good. And it doesn't matter what it is. It can be love stories or political thrillers like the ones I write, or literary fiction, or Westerns, or young adult, or it doesn't matter. That's your kind of thing. And this is what you should do. Find the best examples of the kind of book or story or writing that you want to do, the ones you love the most, the ones that have moved you the most, and reread them. And reread them as many times as you need to so that you're not distracted by the art and by how they make you feel. And that might be a couple times, or it could be 10 times. I don't know. Sometimes when I really love something, it distracts me so much that I almost have to numb myself to its effect on me so that I can start seeing the craft behind the art. But when you get to that point where you can look at something critically and dispassionately, do it. And start asking yourself this question: why is it working so well? What's the writer doing that is so amazing and making it work so well? And this isn't a question about you. That's not what I mean. So don't, like, if I'm reading, I've lived in Japan on and off over the years and visited countless times, and I would say I'm a bit of a Japanophile. So if I read a book that's set in Japan, I'm not looking for, well, of course, I love the book. It's set in Japan and I love Japan. That doesn't matter. That's not the point. It's not I'm not looking for some subjective or idiosyncratic thing. I'm looking for the craft, the principles, like what we're talking about with regard to Follett's book. So if what you're looking for is, how do you write a great action scene, great scene of violence? How do you bring that to life? And I can give you, if that's your thing, I get a decent amount of praise, and I'm grateful for it for my action scenes. And just one of the things that I do is I try to use action words, strong words, like blasted into or rocketed into or smashed into or whatever. You don't want to overdo any technique, but instead of just saying the more obvious things like hit or pushed or something like that, look for words that have more impact. And that's just one thing I do for those scenes. But that's just me. And maybe if I write good action scenes, you want to write action scenes, you could learn something from my scenes. But if it's a love scene, then, and there's some love scene that you thought was just the most beautiful love scene you've ever read in prose, read it again and ask yourself, why is it so good? What is going on here? Or if it's a setting and you just feel like, oh my God, I feel like I'm there in that place by that lake or on that beach or on that mountaintop or in that room or whatever it is. It's magic that you can actually transport someone to a place that's remote in time and space, but there's craft behind it. Like all magic, there's a magic trick behind it. And so when you read like a writer and you scrutinize and analyze that magic piece of writing, if you do it enough, and the more you do it, the more you'll start to see the magic trick behind the magic. And when you get to that point where you're able to identify the magic trick behind the magic, you'll be so much closer to being able to do that same thing yourself. I don't think there's anything more important, as I just said, but I just want to reiterate, I don't think there's anything more important that a writer can do than what I just described. The how-to books are really good. I mean, not every one, but I've read a bunch and I've learned a lot from them. I wish I'd started reading some of the terrific how-to books I've read over the course of my career. I wish I'd started that earlier. I probably would have gotten better faster. And of course, you got to read a lot. I've never met a writer who doesn't just naturally read a lot. And if you don't write, then, well, you're not a writer. So of course you have to write. But do what I just said. Even anything, just once, when we're done for the day and you have a little time, take your favorite passage, your favorite moment, whatever book or the kind of book you want to write, story you want to write, and just reread that passage and ask yourself, what's the magic trick? What's the magic trick? Anyway. Sorry, yeah, someone unmuted and I could hear myself feeding back to me. Anyway. I've got one more thing I want to mention, just so I don't forget, and it's along the lines of everything we've been talking about. There's a video. I should have thought to just send the link directly. Sorry, I didn't, but it's easy to find. It's by a guy named Andy Lasseter, and it's a TED Talk. It's really easy to find. He calls his TED Talk 2 + 2 = 4. And I think if you just Google 2 + 2 = 4 TED Talk, you know, that technology, I always forget what it stands for, technology, something in design talks. 2 + 2 = 4 TED Talk, you'll find it. And the reason I recommend it to you is this. It's another way of understanding what I was talking about at the outset of this analysis of the opening to Key to Rebecca, which is this: to engage the reader, to seduce the reader, you have to start parceling out information on who, what, and where. But you can't give the reader everything, because if the reader has the answer, then immediately boredom sets in and the reader won't go on to the next sentence. So you have to give the information that brings the reader in, but makes the reader hungry for more. And Andy Lasseter put this in a clever way, I think. He calls this 2 + 2 = 4. And he's talking about it in the context of movies, but it's a storytelling principle. It doesn't matter what, whether it's movies, stories, or novels, rather, whatever. But his point is this: don't spell it all out for the reader. Give the reader parts. And so the reader's mind works to put those parts together to come up with conclusions. And this itself, like everything else, you know, there's craft in it and then there's art, because we've all had the experience of, if you're watching a movie or reading a book and something doesn't make sense and you have to pause and actually think about it consciously, cerebrally, and that takes you out of the story. That's not good. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is more a feeling, and your mind is working in the background in a smooth, congruent way that isn't taking you out of the story. Like we were talking about, like the last camel collapsed at noon. You're thinking, You don't have to stop and say, wait a minute, I don't understand. Are we in a desert? Are we at a port in a busy city? It's not like that. You're not out of the story. You're being drawn in. But there is a part of your mind that's saying, huh, desert? That's what I'm talking about. And Lasseter's presentation is really good on this. And I'm just going to throw one more in that's also about movies, and it doesn't pertain directly to how to open a story. In some ways, it's like really the opposite because it's about great endings. But I'm going to mention it anyway for a couple of reasons. One, it's just one of the best presentations I've ever seen on storytelling, ever. It's so good. And the other thing is, you can't end a story well if you haven't set it up well. Because stories are like jokes in the sense that you can't just tell a punchline and get people to laugh. We all know that, right? Actually, you can learn a lot from the way jokes and humor work. You can't just tell a punchline, it's not funny. You have to know what the setup is. And if you don't have a knack for telling the setup in the right way, then all the timing and delivery of the punchline of the world, it won't save you. So the punchline doesn't work unless you've set the joke up properly. And that's true for stories too. It's true, by the way, for so many things in a story. I know I'm departing just a little bit from how to open a story, but all these principles connect. If you're having trouble with something in a story, could be the ending or the ending of a scene or the dialogue or something, and you feel like it's not working, and you keep working on it and it's not coming. Many times what I've found is take a step back. The thing you're trying to fix isn't really the problem. To go back to my joke analogy, it's like you're trying to fix the punchline. The punchline isn't the problem. Problem's in the setup. Take another look at the setup. The biggest problem I find when I teach writing, biggest problem I find with dialogue is that the writer doesn't yet know her characters or his characters. I see that again and again. It takes a lot of work, which if you're as lazy as I am, you really don't want to do. It takes a lot of work to really get to know your characters. It's laborious. I take walks, doesn't matter. I remember Tess Gerritsen once telling me that she likes to lie down on the settee, and I thought, oh my God, that's how I go to sleep. But it doesn't matter. It's whatever works for you. And I asked myself all these questions. Who is this person? What were her formative experiences? Where did she grow up? What does she want? What does she think she wants? What does she really want? What's she afraid of? Everything I can think of. So I've heard people do this exercise, which I have nothing against. It's just, I don't do it, but whatever works for you, you do. People ask, what do my characters read? What music do they listen to? What's in their closets? I am completely agnostic about all these things. They're all different tools, different routes to getting to know your characters really, really well, so that the dialogue is less something that you have to force and something that you start to feel organically. But it's a lot of work. And again, most of the time when I see the dialogue's not working, the problem isn't at the dialogue level, although that can be the case, but it's more, hey, you don't really know the character, so you're not feeling the way the character would react in that situation or what the character would say. And this is again true for everything. So if you're having trouble with something, don't assume the problem is with the thing itself. Sometimes the problem is in the setup. Anyway, this other video I wanted to mention, it's called Great Endings. Wait, I should, give me a second. I should find it because I forgot the name of the guy. I've watched it like 5 times and I forgot the name of the guy. Let me see if Great Endings is enough to get it. No, here, one second. It's by the guy who wrote Little Miss Sunshine, which has a great ending. Yeah, Michael Arndt. So if you Google great endings, Michael Arndt, Arndt, that'll take you to it. And the whole thing is called Endings, the good, the bad, and the insanely great. And I've never seen something smarter and more useful than this. And I've watched a ton of videos and read a lot of how-to books too. It's really, really smart, not just with regard to movies, but again, with regard to storytelling generally. And again, even though it's about, he also has he has another one on Great Beginnings. Actually, it's really good and useful, but it's not nearly as good as the one on Great Endings. And again, great ending. Part of what he's doing in this thing is it's not just about the endings. He talks about why the endings work so well because of the way they've been set up. got to set it up. Otherwise you can't have a great ending. So the truth is the video is more about the setup than it is about the endings. Okay. Sorry, I talked more than I meant to. I've done a talk on Follett's book before, and I've never done it on Zoom, and it's much more interactive when I do it in person. Does anyone have any questions, any thoughts? Please feel free.
Hi, Barry, can I ask one?
Sure, please. Hi, Rob.
I just put it in the chat there as well. I was thinking back to when you were saying, read like a writer. And I had a question about this. You know, I get the whole anaphora thing, starting consecutive sentences with the same words for style, but he does it that much on that one page that to me, it seemed a little bit annoying and I couldn't see the purpose doing it there. The second question I had was the third bottom paragraph. And it seems very, very short, and it's setting the scene about the sun and the shade. But the paragraph that comes after seems to me on the same topic about him pitching his tent to it. Why does he not join them to make it a unified paragraph? Because it would be a certain symmetry there, because at the beginning you would have two sentences beginning with the and two at the end, but he's chosen not to. And I don't get why there's so many anaphora examples going on there.
Wait, what was the word you used? Anaphora?
Anaphora. It means starting consecutive sentences with the same word.
See, you learn something new every day.
And there's tons of them in this page.
So what the man, is that it? Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
like
so
that's
the very third paragraph down from the top, he's got they climbed the leeward stile, then they. And then the next paragraph has got the man, the man, And the next paragraph's got the same. And then a little bit further down, he's got the sun was fierce and high, the long side. There's just so many examples of this that seem to be annoying.
So this is what I was getting at the beginning when I said no book is for everyone, and don't worry, like if you love this or you hate this or anything in between, don't worry about it. It's not so much the point. I think those are really good points. I could see a close line editor or a copy editor saying the same thing. Ken Follett might have responded, hey, that's just my style. I like anaphora, and that's how I roll. So, but totally valid points. I would say still that even if you rewrote it to combine paragraphs or to reduce the level of anaphora or however you like, the principles of unspooling the who, what, where information in such a way that the reader is engaged, but also made hungry for more information, this would still be an exemplary example of those principles. So that's why I present it. But yeah, there's nothing I could ever show that everyone will be like, oh my God, even Shakespeare, I'll bet. I mean, it's funny. It's one of the best essays I've ever come across in my life is George Orwell's Politics and the English Language. But right there in the title, hey, what do I know? And he's George Orwell, and have, I mean, huge respect and gratitude, huge for his essays and his books. But isn't it a little redundant, the English language? I mean, what other English could we be talking about? And actually, he's not really talking specifically about politics and English. All art is propaganda, terrific. So he's actually talking about politics and language, because all his points would apply equally to Japanese or Spanish or Urdu or whatever. So I have a minor complaint about a redundancy in the title of one of the greatest essays ever written, but still, I would have to say one of the greatest essays ever written. So it's totally fine. I mean, I notice things like this all the time, to the point where people who who love me asked me to to keep it to my. I was going to tell you one. I saw a sign on a computer just the other day with my wife, and it said something like, "This computer update might take, I don't know how long. It was like 25 minutes, and you might not have access to whatever for a short duration." And I'm just zoned out. She's like, "What? What do you?" And I was like, "That's the wrong use of duration." She's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, duration typically means like if it said you won't have this update will take 25 minutes, and for the duration you won't have access to X." I'd be like, "That's the proper usage," because when we say duration, we usually think like all the way from 1 to the end of the thing, right? But you wouldn't say, "Well, something's going to take 25 minutes, but within that, you might not have access for a short duration." I was like, "You might mean for a short time," or you might say, you might briefly not have access to something." But it wasn't quite the right, and it's horrible. My friend, the novelist Joe Conrath, once said to me when I was ranting about this stuff, he said, "It must be hell to be you." It's like, it's sometimes rough. So this kind of thing bounces around in my mind all the time. And I actually enjoy it, and I think it's good. But at the same time, if there's craft that you can learn from by reading like a writer, then don't let it stop you.
Yeah, Eyre, I might suggest amending that to say that you might read through the filter of what you're writing, because what you've demonstrated here with this Follett opening, and I write literary fiction, so I'm not going to take issue with what is happening, but you've given us a classic in medias res opening where the main character is in jeopardy, desperate jeopardy. So if you take my statement about reading through the filter of what you're writing, if you were looking for a way to open your piece and you were trying to learn something from the Follett opening, you could find a way to put your character in a similar jeopardy. It doesn't have to be a camel dying in the middle of the desert. It could be a car that runs out of battery in Alaska, and the person's going to freeze to death. It could be someone who is a mile from a water source and can't get there because their leg is broken. But that's, I think, what we're getting from this opening. It's a kind of immediate action. That's what immediate in medias res means to anybody here who doesn't quite know what the term is. And it's a character who's in serious jeopardy. So I think that, that's what we're kind of getting.
So agreed. And I have not done anything remotely like a formal study of like the classic great types of openings, but what you just said makes sense to me. It's really well done, because if you spelled it out too much, then it wouldn't work. Again, Follett's parceling out the who, what, and the where in a way that is really engaging, but definitely we're starting with someone who's in bad trouble. And that it seems to me, it's safe to say that probably is one classic type of opening. There are others. Off the top of my head, I remember reading, I must have been 15 at the time, Stephen King's book, The Shining. And I still remember the first line in that book, which is first line, first paragraph. Jack Torrance thought, officious little prick. And that's it. Now, nobody's in trouble. There's no camel or car broken down or anything like that. But that immediately engaged me, because I thought, who's this guy, Jack Torrance? We're in his head. He's not happy. He's thinking about someone who he finds to be an officious little prick, probably someone in the room with him, but I don't know. Could be a letter, could be a phone call, not sure. So I'm engaged. And it brings me in that way. I'll tell you something I did in one of my books that I'm really proud of, because I think it's difficult. And by the way, it wouldn't even matter. Like, if you might not agree, you might think, no, Barry, you didn't do that well. And it would 100% be okay. I can only tell you what I was going for and that I think I did it well. My second book, I don't remember what it was called. Doesn't matter. A Lonely Resurrection. A huge amount of that opening was carried by my character, John Rain's voice. So that I think is a little harder to do, but if you make the voice compelling enough and you follow the principles that we're talking about spooling out information in a way that makes the reader hungry for more, then I'm sure it can be done. And that's probably like, if, again, I'm not a student of these things, I wouldn't say, or not. I mean, I read like a writer, certainly. I know the ones I love, but I've never tried to categorize them. But I'll bet you could find another type of category that's like the voice opening, where you're just with the character and you don't really know where this is or what it's about, but there's just something about this character that makes you want to know more about her or him and what's going on in the book. That would be another example. There are probably countless examples, but the most important thing, find the ones that work for you. Find the type of opening that you want to write and see what you can learn by reading the best examples of that kind of opening. Sorry, I didn't have my chat open until now. I told you I'm not the most Zoom capable person. I apologize. I'm happy to keep going. I don't know what the schedule is, but let me see if I can answer some of the questions you guys have asked.
Well,
I'm sorry.
since we got off to a bit of a late start, maybe we can take about 5 more minutes for questions.
Happy to.
Barry, for one of your books, I don't remember which one. I don't remember the character's name, but it had to be one of the greatest openings I've ever seen. It was, you opened it with, the last thing so and so thought before the bullet went through his brain was that things are finally looking up.
Yeah, that was That was Fault Line. The last thing Richard Marcus thought before the bullet entered his brain was, things are really looking up. And yeah, I mean, I try not to, just for obvious reasons. I mean, I don't know that I can be so objective about my own stuff. One, and two, I don't want to seem to be tooting my own horn, even if I think it's a good example. But since you mention it, I'll tell you where I got that from, or where I was inspired for that kind of opening, was the opening of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, which I know it's heretical, but it wasn't really my favorite book. My wife asked me how I liked it. This is when we were in college. And I said, I think maybe 80 years would have been enough. And she was like, so, but whatever. I mean, no book is for everyone. But that book opens with the line, paraphrasing, but it's like, as he many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Arbendigo Arbez would remember the day his father first took him to see ice. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Whoa, he's facing the firing squad. Why is he thinking about the ice? What's the relationship with the father? How did he get from seeing ice to, and why is he thinking about that now as he's facing tremendous opening? And so with that template in mind, I wrote that the last thing Richard Marcus thought before the bullet entered his brain was, things are really looking up. Because then I hope, my intention anyway, is that you wonder, wow, who is this guy? Why did a bullet just enter his brain? What about the juxtaposition? Oh my God, he was just thinking things are looking up, things are going well, and bam, he got shot in the head. What is all that about? So I felt like that was an effective hook. Certainly that was my intention in writing it that way. And so I hope that's another good example. But again, I don't know what kind of books you're writing or what kind of openings have drawn you in instantly and made you keep going. But whatever they are, look for that kind of example and ask yourself, wow, why is this working so well? And that's the way to find the magic trick. Let me see. Laura Katz asked, what do you think of an opening that is abstract, like the first sentence of Anna Karenina? And so I have to first admit that I have not read Anna Karenina.
All right, so I'll tell you what it is. It's the one that's like, all happy families are happy in their own way, but all unhappy families are. So it's very abstract. It doesn't really give you any of the who or where or what, but it still feels very engaging. That's a great point.
And it reminds me of another one that I haven't read, but I know because it's one of my wife's favorite books. This is Jane, I think it's, God, I'm gonna be embarrassed. She'll be mad at me if I get it wrong. I think it's Jane Eyre that, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a rich man in possession of a fortune must be in want of a wife.
That's Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
No,
please don't tell her. No, I'll tell her myself. She'll be like,
but what those two, I'm sorry, but what those two books have that Follett doesn't have is an overt narrator who's really taking charge of the opening lines. Follett is much more distanced than those two books are. So it's a completely different approach to narrative.
Yeah. What I would say is, if it works, then it's good. And a screenwriting guru I really like named Robert McKee once pointed out something about comedy that is absent for all other genres. And it's this: if you know if it's working because the audience laughs. And if the audience doesn't laugh, you know it's not working. We don't really have that with books. So it's a little harder to gauge, but I personally find those openings really powerful. And it's a bold thing to deliver on, because you're really going you're stepping a little bit away from what I talked about, which is the who, what, and where in terms of what's in the story. And you're getting a little bit more of an overt feel for who is the storyteller, and do I really want to spend a lot of time with this person? I think that's a high wire act, but I have seen it done brilliantly. The best example I know, because I'm more lowbrow than highbrow, The Godfather, Mario Puzo, which is author omniscient. He has a style of putting his arm around you, and now he's going to tell you a story almost with his own commentary. That's not how I write. And I think I don't know, maybe it's not as hard as I think, but it's hard for me. It doesn't come naturally to me. But if you're going to do that, it can be extremely effective. And those openings to me are good examples of it. That's all I would say. And if it works for you, and that's the kind of book you want to write, I would go back to those openings and maybe to the whole book or however much of the book you need to reread and ask. You could even say, God, this seems like an exception to what Barry presented as a rule, although I don't really mean it as a rule. I don't really think in terms of rules, more in terms of principles. But it seems like an exception, and yet it's working. What is it? And that's a super interesting question. And you can answer it if you read it and talk about it enough. You'll be like, you know why it's working? Because of this. By the way, counterexamples are also great. I once heard Stephen King say,
I'm sorry, Barry. I'm going to have to cut you off because our next speaker has come in and we want to be able to start the next presentation.
I hope that was helpful,
so
everyone. It was a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Barry.
Everyone, you can unmute your mics and join me in giving a big round of applause to Barry Eisler.
Thank you all. You're all very nice.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much,
Barry. I hope it was
Thank
helpful, and I hope we'll see you next year in Japan.
Yeah, great.
Hope so.
Okay. Bye. Cheers.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as I say, I would like to try to start the next presentation on time, which means 10 o'clock. So we have 3 Japanese minutes. And our next presentation will be on cinematic storytelling by Stephen Wolfson. So see you soon.